Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Monday. It is November 1st. November 1st, Vince, means number one, we're getting into that money month of the season. It means we can start talking more about bowl projections, which we'll discuss a little bit today. And it means we're kind of down that home stretch where we really find out what this Notre Dame football team and everybody else in college football is all about. So today's show, by the way, I'm with Vince D'Addario, our football analyst at IrishBreakdown.com. I'm Brian Driscoll, the publisher. And today's show, we're first going to talk briefly about some news and notes from Brian Kelly's press conference today. And then we're going to dive into a roundup of college football. And in between that, we're going to talk a little bit about Notre Dame's bowl projections, which I normally don't start paying attention to them until we get close to the time of the college football playoff rankings, which come out tomorrow night, because I feel like people that do bowl projections like in weeks 4 and 5 or
preseason.
Yeah. It's just like, seriously, dude.
It's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Which is why we've avoided them like the plague until now. But I feel like we're 2/3 through the season. All right, we're 8 games in. We're in November, and it's time to start looking at, okay, how Notre Dame plays these next 4 games is going to have a big impact on where they're seated and where they're slotted and who they play. So some very intriguing matchups, which we'll dive into, Vince. But let's first talk about the Notre Dame press conference with Brian Kelly. Obviously, the big news, not unexpected at all, but still big news, is that Kyle Hamilton will not play this weekend against Navy. So 2 good things about that. Number one, it's another week where he's not practicing, so there's not it was very clear from Brian Kelly's comments, Vince, that it's still a rehab week. It's a get him healthy week. So it's not like he's going to be practicing, which is a positive. Let that knee in his back rest and heal. And number 2, Vince, there's just no reason to play Kyle Hamilton against Navy.
Zero. It's not. I mean, is Notre Dame better defensively if Kyle Hamilton plays?
Always, against every opponent.
That's not even a question. That's
right.
That's not even. That's like when you're doing a science experiment. That's like the understood part, and so you move that aside. Like, we get that, but it's not going to be the difference in Notre Dame winning, and it's not going to be anything that's going to help Kyle Hamilton's draft status. So it doesn't help him personally. It isn't the difference between a win or a loss.
It helps the team, but it shouldn't move the needle from having him. But in this game, loss. I mean,
because they played the best offense that they're going to play all season this past week without him and won the game by 10.
Still won.
Okay.
And that was against a team that's much better than the one they're going to face on Saturday.
Just a little bit. So,
listening to the press conference, it's kind of funny. It's just like, this isn't vintage Navy. It's not.
No.
This is a 2-6 Navy team that's, I kind of listen like there's some sort of offensive awakening that Navy's had recently and scored 24, 17, 20, 20. They've scored over 20 points twice all year. Once was in a win over UCF, they got 30 points, 34 points, and their defense stinks. And then they scored 20 in their most recent win over Tulsa. And Tulsa also was pretty bad this year, which is kind of wild because they were really good last year, but they're 3-5 now.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of guys. I mean, both of their starting second corners transferred to Missouri, and
then they lost
they lost Zaven Collins, who was a first-round NFL draft pick, and so it's been a strange year for old Tulsa.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's out.
One of the things
I'm curious about, One of the things I'm curious about, and we'll dive more into this as we get into the week, is one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, do you defend Navy with your base personnel, or do you defend Navy with sort of a different look? And we're going to find out what Marcus Freeman and Mike Ellison talked about. That was are going to decide. That was another comment from Brian Kelly. And this has been true in past years. Mike Ellison has always had a very big role in helping prepare the game plan against Navy because the defensive line is such a vital part to that. And he talked about that. And then, of course, Marcus Freeman has defended the triple option twice in his 4 years at Cincinnati. They played Army last year, and then they played Navy in 2018 and really did very well against both teams. We talked yesterday about how well they did against Navy in 2018, blew them out, shut down their run game. And they had good success last year against Army. And Army was a decent team last year. Cincinnati held them to 182 yards, which was tied for their third lowest. The only other 2 teams that held Navy below their season average, or Army below their season average, was Citadel and Navy, 2 other triple option teams, which always happens. I mean, almost every year, Navy's lowest rushing yard total is either against Army or Air Force.
Right. It's when you're looking in the mirror and they see it every day at practice.
Right,
I mean, that just makes sense.
Yeah. Right. And so that's usually the case. So he's had good success. He has twice faced the triple option, and neither time has he given up more than 200 yards rushing,
which is huge. And that's with teams that are decent at running the option. And this team is not great at it. So
no, they
I had
a
less
good performance.
worry.
Yeah, they had a good performance against Tulsa, but I mean they're not good. They're not good. So Vince, let's dive into. There wasn't really a whole lot else noteworthy from the press conference.
Right.
Brian Kelly talked about Jack Cohn, and he always had faith in him, and didn't listen to the outside noise about him, which is. I had no problem with that. I don't want the Notre Dame head coach to necessarily be dictated by things that people say. I do think maybe if there are certain people whose opinion you like and respect, maybe you listen to it at times. But during the season, you're not making decisions based off what Brian Driscoll or Tim Priester or ESPN or Fox Sports or anybody else is saying.
You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah.
And Brian Kelly didn't get to where he is right now by allowing those things.
And that's fair.
So he made that clear, and he's already made it clear this year that he doesn't care what we think anyway. So, one of the things he talked about too was interesting was the need to push the ball vertically against Navy, and how the game plan that they've had in recent weeks is going to continue, but you have to be careful. And he made this comment, which I liked, which is you have to be careful about, you don't want to get into this ball control offense, which Notre Dame kind of was against North Carolina. You had mentioned that, it was quick game. And he said, you got to be able to push the ball vertically, because if you go on these 5-minute drives, you're playing right into the Navy's hands of shortening the game.
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to come out and you want to score, and you want to score fast and put Navy behind.
Absolutely.
Get Navy behind.
Because no triple option team is good at coming back. I mean, it's just not built for that. So, yeah. Completely agree.
Every time Notre Dame's jumped on Navy quickly, they've been routes. They've turned out to be routes. The only exception was 2014 when Joe Schmidt got hurt in the first half. Second half, Navy came back. Actually, they started coming back in the second quarter, if you remember that game. I think they were up 24-7, and then Navy ended up taking a second half lead. Notre Dame ends up winning by 10. But for the most part, when Notre Dame jumps on them early, they go down. Mm-hmm. So that's that's the deal. And then we had a quick question from Tommy Guns. We'll get more into this during the week, but honestly, I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And that's not flippant. I've always felt this way. I personally prefer more than 3 people up front, whether that's in a 3-5, sort of like the 5. What you're saying is a 5-2, be like more of a 5-3, 5-2, but more like a 3-4 kind of thing with 2 stand-up guys, or a 4 down. What I don't like is when teams go 3-3 stack. I don't necessarily love that. Now, I am looking forward to watching some of Marcus Freeman's film against Navy from 2018, and then also against Army last year to see what they did. I just know, having coached in the triple option and against it, more often than not, when teams go with 3-3 stacks, it ends up not being super successful.
This is the face of offensive coordinators in the triple option when they see a legit 3 front without the 2 hangers like you were talking about. If it's just 3 down and a 3-3 stack, that's fantastic, because those offensive linemen are able to get to the second level so much faster. And triple option teams, all they want to do is 3 yards, 3 yards, 3. I mean, they don't. It's not necessarily. Yeah, you're going to bust those big plays and things like that because teams get out of whack defensively and they don't follow what they're supposed to do. But it's just meant to get 3-4 yards every time. And if you're going to give me 3 down and then 3 backers, I'm going to get that every time. Right. And so you lick your chops if that's the case. So yeah, I would not want to see that at all.
And we'll get more into the reasons why it's not good to be in that, and why it's better to be an aggressive front, and all that when we break Navy down on Wednesday. So we'll start that on Wednesday. Got a super chat here from Tatted Up Irishman. He goes, "Hey coach, watching live today with my grandpa. He wants to know if you ever had hope to coach Notre Dame. He thinks you would do a great job. Would you go if offered?" I mean, when I've talked about this in the past. I mean, when I was a kid, my dream wasn't to grow up and play in the NFL. My dream was to grow up and coach Notre Dame. I always wanted to be a football coach. Would I have loved to have coached Notre Dame someday? Absolutely. I mean, I'm a Notre Dame fan and I was a football coach. Of course, I would have loved to coach Notre Dame. It's not something I think about now. It's not something I've thought about a long time. Would I go if offered? Probably not. No, I wouldn't. And the reason is, number one, when my wife married me, I wasn't a football coach, and she did the coach's wife thing for a couple of years. And, that's a hard life, especially for someone who didn't sign up for it. So I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't have really any desire to get back into coaching. And the thing about it is, let's say I went to let's just say hypothetically, Brian Kelly offered me a job tomorrow and, hey, start 2022 season. And I took it. And Brian Kelly retires in 2 years and a new coach comes in and he wants a brand new staff. Then what do I tell my wife? Hey, I know that we talked about, living in Indiana and doing this job for a long time, but because I got back into coaching, and there's a new coach here.
Now we're moving.
Now we're moving, right? Or I'm just going to go run a website again, and criticize the coach who just replaced me and the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
There's nothing good that would come out of that. I also believe that if I ever pursued a job at Notre Dame and applied for a job at Notre Dame while in this capacity, like, did I apply for GA jobs back in the day when I was coaching? I'd be lying if I said no, right? Why wouldn't I? I sent GA applications out to everybody. That's what you do when you're young.
Yeah,
you're just trying to hope somebody gets you, gives you a conversation, a call. But would I ever even apply or consider or entertain that kind of offer now? No, I wouldn't, because it would be very difficult for me to accept that somebody's being objective when they pursued something, were rebuffed, and then were being critical of the people that rebuffed them. Because then it looks like, well, are you being critical of this coach because you wish you had his job? I have to deal with that crap from people anyway. It would be valid if I pursued an opportunity at Notre Dame and then didn't get it, so I would never do it, have no interest in it. I appreciate the sentiment, though. The fact that people think I could do a good job there, it means a lot to me. But no, I don't have any interest in doing that. But yeah, I think every Notre Dame fan, when they're a kid who wants to get into coaching, thinks about, gee, I'd love to coach Notre Dame. I'd love to have their coach. I tell you what, I wouldn't mind doing is if they wanted to just give me like the salary that those guys make now, I would love that. But I love what I'm doing. I really do. I like being my own boss. I love being able to talk Notre Dame. I love being able to do this on a daily basis. And I also love the fact that, as I've joked before, if Notre Dame loses, nobody's trying to fire me. So that's one of the biggest pluses of not being a coach anymore, because that's part of the job.
Your job description, your job security is not in the hands of teenagers. I mean,
the era of coaches being at schools for 20 plus years or coaches being at schools for 20 plus years, it's gone. Yeah. I mean, Gary Patterson's out at TCU. I mean, if anyone was ever going to be able to go out on his own terms, it should have been Gary Patterson at TCU.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I've heard he was part of the decision, but he was going to get fired if he didn't step away. So, I like what I do. I like what I do, and I'm happy where I am, but I appreciate the sentiment. We have another super chat here from Brian Medved. Thank you for the super chat, Brian. It says, hey, guys, who are some teams, stadiums you'd like to visit that we don't ever or rarely play? Who would be some teams you'd like to see in a New Year's Six game bowl this season? So
two big questions.
We'll answer the first one, and then we're going to use the second one, Brian. This is a perfect segue. Well done, Brian. Because there's really not a lot else to talk about from the press conference. It was
Agreed.
a normal, no news, just normal press conference. Who are some so I'll be honest with you, some of the places that I'd like to go to, Notre Dame has on their schedule moving forward. Notre Dame is going to play Texas A&M. I've always wanted to be at a game at Texas A&M. I've wanted to cover a game at the Shoe. They play Ohio State in a couple next year, so I'll be there for that, hopefully. I've always wanted to cover a game at the Rose Bowl. I've always wanted to be, or I don't even know about cover game, just be at a Rose Bowl game, even if it's not Notre Dame. I've always wanted to go to Pasadena for a Rose Bowl game. And the interesting thing is my first memory of a game in the Rose Bowl was actually an NFL game. It was the Broncos-Giants Super Bowl in '86 against John Elway's first Super Bowl trip was 8, but it was paid in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. So, but then just growing up in the Midwest, you fall in love with the Rose Bowl and the pageantry and all of all that type of thing. So Trying to think. I would love to watch a game at the Swamp. I would. The only other place I would have wanted to see a game is not there anymore, and it's the Orange Bowl, like the actual Orange Bowl.
Right. Not
even though I heard it was a dump, I would have loved to have it's still the Orange Bowl. You know, I mean, because for me, it's about the iconic nature of it. Like, okay, like the Coliseum is now, it's a dump now. But the first time I covered a game there, Vince, was 2014 was my first trip there. And I'm standing on the field after the game, and I'm thinking of all the iconic things that have happened here, from Notre Dame games, but the 84 Olympics were in this place. The first Super Bowl ever between the Packers and Raiders was in the Coliseum. You think of all the the great Raider runs when the Raiders were actually in LA. You think of the history, and that's kind of the thing for me that I really like. I mean, Alabama, I have zero desire to ever be at a game at LSU. There's some places I have like that just because I heard how their fans are. But I mean, most of the places I'd ever want to watch a game at, I've already been to just to cover games. But Texas A&M, Alabama, and Florida and Ohio State are four that Penn State. That's one. Again, I'd also like to watch Penn State get beat there. That would even be more fun. But that's a I like those big, cool, classic stadiums. That's just my 2 cents. What about you, Vince?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you on some of those. I think the Swamp would be a fun place to go. I thought the Coliseum,
which again is also on Notre Dame's future schedule.
Yeah, that's true. The Coliseum, I've just heard so many negative things about the Coliseum and how just what a dump it is. That I don't know that I want to go there. But A&M, I think that's a good one. That's not one I would have thought about on my own. The 12th man and all the stuff that they have going on there. I think that would be a really cool environment. There's a few SEC, type environments I'd like to, because I always hear, how amazing the SEC is and the atmosphere and all that. I would like to, like Georgia. I would like to,
Georgia's pretty cool.
Ole Miss, maybe, just because of I would like to see that, just to see what the hullabaloo is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, honestly, I would love to see some of these new multi-billion-dollar NFL stadiums, just because it's the opposite of everything, of all the teams that I follow, right? Like, I would have loved to go to Fenway to watch Notre Dame play there, right?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I would have loved to go to that game, okay, for example. But, like, I follow the Cubs, Wrigley. It's the second oldest stadium in the, Notre Dame. They're still playing in their stadium.
Would our friendship end if Notre Dame played at Wrigley and I didn't let you go cover the game?
It wouldn't. It would take a severe hit.
Okay.
just being honest with you on that one.
Yeah, understandably so. Understandably so.
Like the Vegas game next year, like that would be I think that would be a cool, because I just want to like the opulence.
You're going to that one. We've already talked about that.
The opulence of like Vegas and then like the new stadium in LA. Like I want to see what that is all about too.
I actually don't like the new NFL stadiums that I've been to so far to cover games. I don't. And usually partly that's because the media gets put like in the corner.
Right.
Like,
yeah, good point.
Nobody puts baby in the corner. Yes, they do. NFL teams do it all the time, and the Vegas one, but the Vegas one will be cool just to say you played in Lambeau Field. That's one I forgot about.
I was really looking forward to that trip last year.
I'm hoping they still do that again.
I think they're planning on it, but I don't know that for a fact.
Like 2026 or 2027 or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
I'm sure it'll be here before.
And it's one of the reasons I'm still mad at myself. I didn't get to go to Oklahoma in 2012. I've always wanted to watch a game at Oklahoma, but I've been to Texas. I was at Darrell Royal Stadium in 2016. Clemson's a great place to watch a game. For me, Vince, you know what it's more about? For me, and I absolutely love this question because I love college football. For me, it's not so much about being at stadiums. I want to be at I want to be at an Iron Bowl someday.
Sure.
I want to be at a Michigan-Ohio State game someday. I want to be at a Texas. I want to be at the Red River Shootout. I'm sorry, it's still the Red River Shootout.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I would like. I would love to be, even though I'd have to go to California to do it. I would love to be at a USC UCLA game in the Rose Bowl. Not in the Coliseum, than in the Rose Bowl.
I think it's cool that they both wear their home jerseys now.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
I think that's pretty sweet, to be honest with you. Yeah, I like that.
So those are more of the things I would rather see are those type of games. I've been to the Jacksonville Stadium before. It would be cool to be there to watch a Georgia-Florida game, right? Those are more the things I care more about than specifically stadiums, but there are still some cool stadiums. So, I'd like to see certain stadiums for a game that means something. That's why I was more excited about watching Notre Dame play at Lambeau than just going to a Packer game.
I would have a hard time going to a Packer
Green
game.
Bay's not that far away. I mean, we could do a trip there, but it's just I don't really care to watch the Packers there,
Right,
but
exactly.
I would love to watch because I'm more of a college football guy. But to see that with a Notre Dame game would be pretty awesome.
Agreed.
That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. I've got, stuff I want to talk to you about later about the future. Remind me.
Just we'll get into that. We have another super chat from Mike Lane. Thanks for that, Mike. You guys are a permanent fixture in my AirPods. I appreciate your insight and drama-free podcast. Not all Irish fans make that easy. Go Irish. Thank you for that, Mike. Thank you for that very, very much.
I love it. That's awesome.
It's funny, some of the responses I get from people about that listen to our show. I've had two wives tell me that they have to listen to us all the time. One wife told me, she goes, "Yeah, I go to." This was her opening conversation to me. I go to bed to your voice every night. Excuse me? Yeah. When I go to bed, my husband's always playing you guys' podcast. Okay, that makes more sense.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for clarifying.
But I love it. But that's been the cool thing about the tailgates is you meet these parents, right? They bring their kids to the tailgate.
Yeah.
And then the kids are like, hey, my kids listen to you. My kids know your voice. It's just, it's really cool to just to think about that. And that's what makes this community so much fun. But thank you so much for that super chat, Mike. Got a couple more here before we dive into the bowl matchups. Matt Baisley, thank you for the super chat. I was at OU. We took over the stadium, went with my best friend who was a diehard OU fan. OU started fast, and friend said, have to stay the whole game. We did.
Yeah, I bet you did.
Yeah, because if you remember, Oklahoma was driving that first drive, and then that snap over the quarterback's head just completely crushed that drive, and then they didn't do a whole lot after that.
Right.
And then Lucas Chapman, where do you see Notre Dame as a team by the end of the year? If the run game O-line keeps improving, the team will be hard to beat. Long way to go. But I think this, and then the question from Brian
about the matchups.
Who would you like to see in the New Year's Six? I think these two things are really ideal segues for what we've seen so far from bowl games. So the two that we're seeing now, bowl matchups today. For example, I looked at CBS Sports, ESPN, and Brett McMurphy at the Action Network, and his are. Okay. I just kind of like to read his because I just kind of like to laugh at Brett McMurphy. But they were either Peach Bowl or Fiesta Bowl. Most ESPN and CBS all had Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, which I've been to a Fiesta Bowl. I actually got to cover the Ohio State Notre Dame game after the 2015 season. The opponents are interesting.
Okay.
I've seen Wake Forest. I've seen in the Fiesta Bowl, I've seen Wake Forest. I've seen Kentucky today, and I saw Oklahoma State. And, to me, Vince, here's the question that I have, and I want to know from Notre Dame fans. I want you all to let us know. There's a lot of talk about how Notre Dame needs to win a big New Year's Six bowl. They need to get that big bowl game mantra off their back, which I understand. 0-8 since the Cotton Bowl after the 93 season. They beat Texas A&M 24-21 after the 93 season. That's the last time Notre Dame won a major bowl, which is the Cotton, Fiesta, Rose, Orange, Sugar, and Peach, right? They haven't won one of those. They're 0-8 in those. So, yes, I would love for them to win a major bowl, but honestly, I care more about beating LSU in the Champ Sports Bowl or Camping World Bowl than I do about beating Wake Forest in the Fiesta Bowl or Kentucky in the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, I don't think beating Kentucky. Right. I feel like young people care more about who you beat than where you beat them. Meaning, if they played Alabama in the Cheez-It Bowl, that would have a lot more impact on Notre Dame than playing Kentucky in the Fiesta Bowl.
Right.
So let's say Notre Dame plays Kentucky or Oklahoma State or Wake Forest. I think Notre Dame fans would just love. I think for me, it's just let's just get that big bowl game off our back is kind of the thought that people have, which I completely understand.
I get that
but
too.
From a national media perspective, they're not going to give Notre Dame credit for winning a major bowl if they beat Kentucky, Oklahoma State, or Wake Forest,
or like a Power 5 or like non-Power 5 if they get matched up with whoever that happens to be. Right. I mean, it's not going to happen. They're not going to.
Only exception would be as if they get a big bowl game rematch against Cincinnati.
Yeah,
that'd be the only exception because then you rematch and payback and all that. That would get a little bit of love and but then if you beat them, it's like, well, they're not that good.
Well, they're not Power 5, so whatever. That's what you would hear. I mean, that's what
they're so predictable.
Yeah,
they're so predictable.
No doubt about it.
So that's my question that I want to ask Notre Dame fans is: Would you rather beat a name school by name? I mean, Oklahoma, Michigan, Penn State, Texas, LSU, did I say Penn State already? Florida, Georgia, a team like that in a non-major bowl, or would you rather beat a team like Kentucky, Wake Forest, or Oklahoma State in a major bowl? That's That's
a really tough question for me because if they're in a non-New Year's Six bowl, that means they've lost another game. To me, I mean, that means they're going to lose another game. They're going to be 10-2, and that's going to be pretty disappointing for me based on who's left on the schedule.
Right.
So that means they probably lose to Virginia, let's say. So now they're 10-2, and they would have the opportunity to play a 2-loss Michigan team, for example, potentially. Right. That matchup is better. But I'm already disappointed in the season because they're 10-2. So I don't know. It's a really hard question.
Well, the way I was looking at it is more of like, let's just say hypothetically that they don't make it. Let's say that there's a couple 1-loss, whatever. But yeah, it's a tough one. We have a couple people that have kind of have already. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of this. Rob Didoff says, I want a major bowl win. We can't help who we play, and I want the monkey somewhat off our back.
And I get that.
Yep. Go Irish says Wake Forest, UK, and Oklahoma State don't excite me whatsoever. I'd love to see a Cincinnati rematch, Michigan or Oregon. So he cares more about
the name,
the opponent. Now, the ideal scenario is a major bowl against an Oregon, a Michigan,
no question,
right? That kind of program. Brian Dembo wants a blue blood, and Matt D wants a blue blood. So does TJ. But then we kind of get into Matt Baisley, big game, but then John Keevers, it's New Year's Six, no question against whoever. Based Zoomer says major bowl. So we have a lot of this back and forth, and I think that to me, that makes this an interesting conversation. Do you care more about them? Yeah. May say, I'd rather beat a name school. Those are the programs we are recruiting against. No one cares about Oklahoma State, and that's my thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that.
Because that's the dichotomy here, Vince. It's either A, you're looking at it from your perspective as a fan, which is totally fine. There's not a wrong answer here, right? This is what makes it fun. We're talking sports, right?
Absolutely.
There's I just want to get that there because I think a lot of fans look at it as like we've got this monkey on our back, but it's also the perception. Well, they haven't won a major because like ESPN says it hasn't won a major bowl game since 1994. Well, they can't say that anymore if you win the Fiesta Bowl over Kentucky. Right. So they can not give you credit, but they can't use that against you anymore. Right. But then there's the other part where Mace is looking at it saying, but what does beating Kentucky do for your recruiting? Because recruits, but they won the Fiesta Bowl. They don't care because you have to understand that the young people have grown up in an era where bowls don't mean anything unless it's a playoff game.
They don't.
Sad. That's sad truth.
True. Yeah.
It's sad truth. And I hate that. And I wish college football would do something about it.
I mean, New Year's Six, we can all talk about how we want to be in a New Year's Six, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just because of the name of it and the money that's handed out.
And because of how we grew up viewing bowls.
Exactly.
I wish college football and the NCAA would do something about that and bring meaning back to those games, but they don't. I mean, they're not, because it's all about money now. It's not about tradition and the pageantry and all that. It's just about money.
Right.
So that's why, to me, it's about the name.
Interesting take here. It's from Sean. He says, I want a unique team that wouldn't be a normal for Notre Dame to play.
Yeah, so he's not thinking like Michigan. It'd be something like Oregon. Right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Something like that. Yeah, that's going to be Let's see here. Logan Gagne says there's projections of playing Michigan in the Fiesta according to Stuart Mandel, so could have both. That would be an ideal type of thing, is to get a big name like that. I don't really put a lot of stock in what Stuart Mandel says, but I would like that. I would like that, absolutely.
It's going to be interesting to see where Michigan falls, because I would project, obviously they've already lost to Michigan State, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but they are probably going to lose to Ohio State. So they're going to be 10-2. They're not going to be in the Big Ten championship. So where do they fall as far as the bowl rankings are concerned, right? I mean, it's going to be – the next few weeks are obviously going to tell us a lot, depending on how Michigan State does against Ohio State and, you know, what that Big Ten championship looks like and things of that nature. But Michigan might be the fourth best Big Ten team when it's all said and done. So if that's the case, then they're not going to make a New Year's Six.
Right.
But
yeah, because they've got one loss now, but they still have to play at Penn State, at Maryland, and home against Ohio State. Right. And that's what's going to make this final month of the season is going to be a lot of fun in college football.
Yes,
there's still so many big games left. We have another one from A. Murphy. He goes, heck, at this point, I don't know which person is A. Murphy in the picture. So, so A. Murphy says, heck, at this point, I just want, because I don't want to say he, and then it's like, wait a minute, my husband's not on here. This is me, right? But heck, at this point, I just want them to win a major bowl game, period. And Matt D says playoff for New Year's Six, a win. I get it. I get it. Richard Wagner takes a different perspective. Wake Forest unbeaten would be a great game and win. A great game. I see. Here's the thing. I think we could be able to look at it and appreciate it as Notre Dame fans. I think beating Wake first of all, an unbeaten Wake Forest team is not playing in the Fiesta Bowl because it's not a playoff game. Okay, if Wake Forest goes 13-0, they're going to be in the college football playoff. Okay, but for me, if let's say they lose to Clemson late, all right, really good game, they still go on to win the ACC championship. I think beating Wake Forest I think it'd be a fun game. It'd be a great game to cover. It's just not going to be a needle moving game. Doesn't move your needle perception wise. It doesn't move the needle recruiting wise. What it would do for Notre Dame fans, which I think a lot care about, and I get it. Trust me, I get it. Because I have this struggle myself, and my opinion changes from moment to moment. It really does. Because like I said, there's not a wrong answer. It's just, but when I look at it from a recruiting standpoint, what actually helps the program, I don't care where, unless you play Wake Forest in how about Muhlenberg in the Pinstripe Bowl? I would hope Notre Dame would win that one convincingly. I think they could do that one.
I had to throw that one out.
Yeah, that would be although it'd be home field advantage for Muhlenberg because Allentown's not that far from New York City. But yeah.
I thought you'd get a chuckle out of that.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good. But that's the thing is just you want something that's going to move the needle as a program is kind of usually where I fall on this one. But again, I always kind of fall back to I make these really great arguments why it's better to play a big name team in a smaller bowl, and then the back of my mind's like 0-8 in major bowls, 0-8 in major bowl. And it's just exactly. I'm tired of hearing that. I'd like to get that off my chest.
Agreed.
Read that one, Vince.
Yeah, Irishman 7114 says I would love to beat a big name school. The problem is if we win a major bowl against a not major opponent, it's quote, they didn't play anyone, unquote. If they beat a good team in a bad bowl, so-and-so wasn't that good. Bingo. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely correct. I agree with you 100%. That's absolutely going to be the narrative because however they can negatively spin. Because remember all the buildup a couple of years ago when Notre Dame was going to play Iowa State. It's the up-and-comers and Matt Campbell and this, that, and the other. And it was and then Notre Dame blew them out. I was like, well, it was just Iowa State.
Right. Well, and Imgo Irish has that. He makes that comment. He says, was anyone excited when Notre Dame beat Iowa State or Rutgers in bowl games? There rests your answer. Notre Dame craves the biggest stage possible. So do I. I understand what he's saying here, but I don't think those analogies work because we're not talking about beating Wake Forest or Kentucky in the Insight.com Bowl. Right. We're talking about playing them. I mean, with all due respect, if Notre Dame played Iowa State in the Fiesta Bowl, that'd be a much bigger moment because, number one, Iowa State would have been a much better team. Notre Dame beat a 7-5 Iowa State team. I think Rutgers was 6-6 or 7-5 when Notre Dame beat them in 2000. What was it, after the 2014 season? No, it was after the 2013 season. And so I think that's a different. They were Rutgers finished that year 6-7 after they lost to Notre Dame. But you know what was considered a big game? When Notre Dame played Florida State in the Champs Sports Bowl and when Notre Dame played Miami in the Sun Bowl. I remember covering the team. That was my first full year covering Notre Dame, was 2010. Now I'd cover recruiting for a few years, like analysis-wise, but I'd never covered the team until that year. And I remember talking to recruits after Notre Dame beat Miami, and they were like, man, that game moved them. I remember talking to a couple Notre Dame coaches who always gave me good information, like truthful information. And they were like, we had kids that dropped us months ago calling us to see if we had room after this freaking Sun Bowl against Miami, because it's Miami. And remember, that wasn't even a good Miami team. They had just fired their coach. I remember Al Golden getting interviewed during the game on the broadcast. Because I remember watching that game. My wife and I were in a hotel in Alabama on our way driving down to Texas for the Army All-American game. And that was a game that first started getting Aaron Lynch's attention about Notre Dame again. So it was a name opponent. So I don't think that right there, and go Irish, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that option's not on the table, because we're not talking about playing one of those teams in a bad game, right? Some bowl that doesn't matter. We're talking about playing him in the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, something like that. And I think that would be a bigger question for me. That's what I think is more in general.
One more comment I want to throw up here.
Yeah, go ahead.
From Chief Brody. He says, listen, if Notre Dame can sneak in the playoff and get blown out, I still want that. 3 out of 4 years in the playoff puts you in elite company. What do you think about that?
We'll discuss that more tomorrow, but I think my initial feeling is I always want that shot. Yes. I would always much rather have that shot at it. Now, if you could predict the future and say, I know it's going to be a blowout, I'd say, okay, go to the Fiesta Bowl and win.
Yeah.
Right. And I get what he's saying. 3 out of 4 years put you in elite company, but that's not going to be the spin. That's not going to be the perception. That's not going to be what.
Right. You can say that, but that's not going to be the spin.
We can say it's like Buffalo Bills fans can say all they want. It's like, I remember when I was growing up, like, it used to drive me nuts because I was a John Elway and a Broncos fan. Well, John Elway's a big loser. I mean, what? Guy's won 3 AFC championships. Yeah, but he always loses in Super Bowl. It's the Super Bowl. It means he's the second. You're the second best team in the league. But that's how people are. If you lose your last game, you're a loser. Right. And exactly. I hate that. Like the Buffalo Bill, the achievement that the early 90s Buffalo Bills teams made to get into 4 straight Super Bowls is a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. But yet they're considered losers because they lost them all.
Right.
That's insane to me. But that's the perception. And so you look at Notre Dame getting in there. If you're going to tell me they're going to get in and play Alabama or Oklahoma and get blown out, and I know the future, I would rather go beat Kentucky in the Fiesta Bowl, because I still believe winning that game is better than getting destroyed. Yeah. If you're going to tell me which would you choose and not give me the option of a prediction of the game, I'm always going to take the playoff, because I always want that chance for a championship. So I hope I answered that. I mean, that's how I view
get that.
It. If I know you're going to get blown out, then I don't want that. Why would I want that? That's how I look at it. Vince, what's your thoughts on that?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And you're right. If Notre Dame has a chance to get into like at the beginning of the year, the way Notre Dame was playing, and they were undefeated at the time before they played Cincinnati, I was thinking to myself, God bless America, I don't want to be in the playoff because it's just not going to go well.
Yes.
Like you don't have to tell me that they're going to get blown out, because I can already see that that's going to happen. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, as Notre Dame continues to get better and they get an offense that gets better, and I'm seeing some signs that this team can compete, especially this season, I'm taking the shot in the Final Four. If Notre Dame can somehow sneak in, I want that shot, because I'm not sure that there's 4 teams that are better than Notre Dame on any given Saturday, to be honest. I'm not talking about, I said 4. I realize Georgia's really, really good, and I get that. Okay. For this conversation,
they're the best team in the country this year. Yes.
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
But I would love to give Notre Dame a shot against anybody else in that first game.
They still have to continue improving, but if they can continue ascending from where they are now, yes, I would say that's true. I would agree. People are freaking out about the defense on Saturday night, and my whole thing is the defense played a bad game and still held North Carolina below their season scoring average.
Right.
I mean,
When you take a step back.
Yeah.
Because I agree.
Hey, let's not forget that
Yeah.
with all due respect, Clark Lee gave up 45 points to a Michigan team that wasn't nearly as good offensively as what North Carolina is.
Sure.
They gave up 45 points to an offense that was led by Shea Patterson. All right. Teams have bad days. It happens.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Last year, you look at Alabama, the team that won the title last year. They gave up 48 points to Ole Miss. Right. It happens. It's part of the game. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would
Ohio
love
State.
Shot.
Yeah.
I would love to see Marcus Freeman on a big stage. I would love to see this offense if they continue to ascend, and that is a big if, right? I mean, we've seen it the last couple of weeks, and we think that it's going to continue. Right. But if that happens over the next 4 weeks or so, I would love to give Notre Dame a shot. I would, and that's not a homer talking, because a month ago I'd say, I want anything but the playoff at this point. But now I'm seeing some signs, and I would be excited for that matchup.
Right. Well, and let's not forget too that Alabama gave up 40. I forgot about this. They gave up 40 points, over 40 points twice last year. Also gave up over 40 to Florida. They gave up over 40 points twice the year before, including once to Auburn. I mean, they gave up 40 to LSU, but I mean, everyone not named Auburn gave up over 40 to LSU that year. So that's not really something to like, well, yeah, of course you gave up 40 to LSU.
Yeah.
They scored 40 on everybody that year. But yeah, D-Rock had an interest. I mean, I get this sentiment. I do. He says, regardless of who we play, the media won't give Notre Dame the credit anyway. So win a major bowl and the monkey goes away. I get that. But I guess what I would say, if they're not going to give you any credit, is the monkey really gone? Or does it just turn into, well, they're 1-8 in the last 9 major bowl games? So to me, that's why I always care more about what is best for the program. And usually that's about what's going to impact recruits a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess but it's a fun discussion. And I love the fact that there's so many different points of view. And even people that come down to the same side come down on it for different reasons.
Yeah, right.
Which makes it even more fun to discuss. And again, if we did this show again tomorrow, I probably would have a different opinion. Like, I honestly am back and forth on this about which one's better. And at the end of the day, I don't think there is a better. As long as it's a win, I don't know if one is necessarily better than the other.
Yeah.
I mean, because I may say I want a big name, but then it'd be nice to kind of go cover the Fiesta Bowl and be like, you know what? They got a Fiesta Bowl win. Fiesta Bowl champs. They'll make those shirts, Fiesta Bowl champs and all that kind of stuff.
Of course.
And I'm also a big proponent of Notre Dame finishing the season with a win. I've said this before. Notre Dame had more positive offseason momentum going into the post-2014 season when they went 8-5 than they did a year later when they went 11-3 or 10-3 and lost to 3 top 5 opponents. They went into that postseason with a little bit of because they had lost their last 2 games.
Right.
Yet they lost 4 to their last 5 in 2014, but because their last game was a win over a team that people, an LSU team, LSU wasn't good that year, but it was still LSU. They went into that offseason with a lot of momentum, and that carried over into the 2015 season, where the post-2015 season carried into a 4-8 season. So I do think that matters. Again, in a game that is so driven by psyche, that stuff matters. Going into an entire offseason with a loss can be challenging unless it's like a loss like Clemson had in 2015, where you lose to Bama in the title game, but man, you just feel like, boy, we were close. I think that would be the only kind of loss. Like if you were to tell me, would you rather go to the Fiesta Bowl and beat Oklahoma or go to the New Year's Six game and play Alabama into overtime and lose in overtime? I'd say take the Bama loss in overtime. And I know that sounds crazy, but I feel like that would do more for look how close we are than beating an Oklahoma in just a bowl game after Oklahoma lost the regular season game. That's kind of my 2 cents. So, Vince, you want to talk about kind of this crazy weekend of college football?
Absolutely. We're good at getting sidetracked.
I don't think that's sidetracked. That was part of the conversation. We said we were going to talk about bowl projections. Yeah.
It's a great discussion.
But that's the fun of the Monday show. And that's why we try to do this in the mailbag, because we don't always want it to just be structured and loose. Us coaching at you and all that kind of stuff. We want to have some fun with it too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
No question. But yeah, this week was nutty. Again,
I want to start in Michigan.
Please do.
Michigan, Vince.
And I just want to say that for all the drawbacks and the negatives of having a night game for the way we do our jobs and things, getting to bed at 2 a.m, et cetera, whatever time it was.
2? Oh, that's right. You stop after the show. I went to bed at 5.
Right.
Okay.
So point taken, right? I mean, it's a late night and it's a long day, but I get to watch more college football. When Notre Dame plays at 3:30, I don't get to watch any college football.
You get to watch the second half of the night games.
Right. Of the Pac-12.
You get to watch a lot of Pac-12 after dark.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Exciting Washington State, Arizona State game. Woohoo.
And it just seems like there's so many good noon games this year too, where it was perfect. And I love the fact that I was able to sit and watch the majority of the noon game because my other show didn't start till 2:00. So it was fantastic. So I do love the fact that there's night games. And P.S., speaking of night games, ESPN put a hold on the Virginia Notre Dame start time until after this week's games.
Right.
So that won't be announced for another week, unfortunately.
I think they're obviously want to see if Notre Dame wins, but I also think that there's some questions about Brennan Armstrong's health. I think that's going to factor into it as well.
That's huge.
If he plays, that's going to be a night game because that's going to be a high scoring, their thought. It's going to be, I hope it's not. I hope Notre Dame can shut them down. I hate high scoring games when just because I have to deal with, what we had to deal with on Saturday night. But anyway, that's going to be an interesting one.
Back to the game in Michigan, in East Lansing. That game was fantastic for so many reasons. It was, Michigan had control of that game early. There's no question about it. And the fact that Michigan State was able to come back in the manner in which that they were able to come back from basically snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat made my life just so much happier because of the way that Michigan looked, the way that Harbaugh looked on the sideline. It was the lesser of two evils, but I was rooting for Michigan State the entire way. There's no chance I'm rooting for Michigan in any scenario. And so I was rooting for the Spartans, and Sparty got it done, and it was glorious. I mean, the way that kid, is it Walker the
Kenneth
third?
Walker.
Yeah. My goodness, 5 touchdowns. I mean, that was one heck of a running back display by him. It was Kyron Williams-esque, the way what he was doing.
His vision is outstanding. Yeah. I mean, he was making, I think that's great. He was making Kyron Williams-esque cuts.
Yeah.
Of course, he's the nation's leading rusher per game, so you could say Kyron Williams making Kenneth Walker-esque cuts.
And that would be a fair assessment. That's fine.
They're similar backs. For me, Vince, it was a great, take away my I hate Michigan stance because I'm torn on I hate Michigan, but then I hate how Michigan State fans handle winning because, they burn crap and, act like Neanderthals and morons and stuff.
Children. I'll just call them.
Yeah. Criminal children. If your children were tipping over cars and beating up cars, that's not acting like a child. That's acting like a criminal. But
That's fair.
Take away all that. It was a great college football game. And I said this before in our predictions. I had some good predictions this weekend and I had some bad ones. I picked Georgia to get upset. Yes, I did. And I said in the first sentence, I'm going to look like an idiot for making this pick. So I don't care. I was crossing my fingers, and we'll talk about that game. But I said this was the game I was most looking forward to this week. And of all the big games this weekend, the Michigan State game is what I was looking forward to. And it was exactly because of how the game played out. I remember saying to a friend of mine, neither one of these teams have the athleticism Notre Dame has. Neither one of them. But they're so much more physical. That's the thing I love. I mean, there was pads popping the whole game. I mean, they were hitting. I mean, there was collisions. We don't see a lot of that in Notre Dame games. We're just not seeing this team really play with that violence right now at this point in time. But it was a great game to watch. Michigan jumps ahead. Michigan State never falters. Just kept battling, never got out of their game plan. And then it comes down to the end, and I thought Harbaugh flinched. That's what I thought. I thought Harbaugh flinched late, and and Mel Tucker's team never flinched. And that was big. And look, Michigan State had every reason in the world to fold. And you're down 30-14. You haven't stopped Michigan all day. Cade McNamara is just looking like freaking Joe Montana out there. Just who's doing the color in that game? Was it Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt?
Yeah, it was Klatt and Johnson. Yeah,
Klatt made a point that was. I mean, I like Joel. I think Joel Klatt's a better in-game analyst than he is a out of game, predictor of things,
Sure.
or analysis of things. But he made a point that Cade McNamara's ball placement today has been like just phenomenal. And it was. I mean, he was putting the ball, not just completing that was like what we saw from Jimmy Clausen all the time in 09.
Yeah.
That's what Cade McNamara did on Saturday. It was brilliant, which made the decision to put J.J. McCarthy in the game late in the fourth quarter that much worse. Now, look, I know that's part of their rotation. They played 2 quarterbacks. J.J. McCarthy had a touchdown in that game. But when the game was on the line and your veteran has played the way that Cade McNamara played, you don't put the freshman in that situation to make that read and make that miss and make a mistake, fumble the ball. You just can't do it. You can't do it. And Michigan didn't make many mistakes on Saturday, Vince, but every time they did, Michigan State took advantage.
Yeah, they did.
And they flat out did. It was a good football game. I'll tell you right now, me, you, and about 3 or 4 dudes in the chat could probably pass for 250 on Michigan State secondary. Okay, I say that, obviously joking,
of course.
But good Lord, remember how? I mean, I'm like, oh my God! Like I had a buddy tell me they were bad, but they're bad. I mean, they can't defend the pass at all. Like, how are they undefeated? And then you're like, oh, Kenneth Walker.
Yeah,
that's how they're undefeated.
He's a one-man
and they play their butts off.
Yeah,
this was such a outside of maybe Kenneth Walker, the talent on this team is so inferior to the talent they had when they were in their early to mid 2010s run.
Yeah,
agreed. But this team play. I mean, Mel Tucker's not working with the play, and yeah, he's got some transfers and all. This is not the talent they had back then. They don't make mistakes, Vince. Like they just don't beat themselves a whole lot. Other than the quarterback had a couple dumb plays, but other than that, they don't beat themselves. But they play hard. And I mean, I loved watching the trench game because we don't get to watch that much covering Notre Dame. We don't get to watch like just great trench warfare. Both sides of the ball. Just
we're talking about ways that they can get away from trench warfare.
Yeah. It was an old school Big Ten game in style of play with a modern score. Right? I mean, is that a fair way to?
Yeah,
it was physical.
It was way more high scoring.
Enjoyed that
than I anticipated. I had Michigan State with a 3-point win, but I was like 24-21 or something was my prediction. I had, if you'd have told me that it was going to be what it was in the high 30s, I'd have been like, nah, there's not a chance that it gets to be that high scoring. Just because I figured they'd be running the ball, and I did not anticipate Walker breaking so many long runs.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how did Michigan allow him to do that? It's just, wow, way to drop the ball, man.
Great vision.
Man.
Yeah. Great vision. Corey D with a super chat here. Corey asks, we will learn a lot tomorrow night, but is a playoff spot for Notre Dame now possible? Yeah, absolutely. I put this on the message board, and we started talking about it last night, Corey. Look, we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but the reality is Notre Dame's going to start in the top 10.
Correct.
And when you start in the first ranking in the top 10, you absolutely have a shot. And then you look at how many of those teams play each other. There's at least 3 games, I think, between teams that will play each other, because you're going to have Michigan and Michigan State and Ohio State have to play each other. If Michigan's ranked ahead of Notre Dame, which is possible, they still have to play Ohio State. And then Georgia and Alabama will have to play each other unless one of them loses a game or two before they play. And then I think there's one other.
Well,
but I mean, so a lot of those teams play each other.
Alabama.
And then there's other big games that those teams still have to play. Auburn. Look, I thought Ole Miss was going to smack Auburn this weekend, and Auburn outplayed them from start to finish. Auburn's playing at a really high level. I mean, to watch, and kudos to Coach Harsin and the job he's doing this year for Auburn. I remember watching them, Vince, early in the year when they lost to Penn State, who I don't think is – I've not thought Penn State's good all year. I wonder if Ladarius Martin's in the chat today, because remember how he kept disagreeing with us. Y'all keep sleeping on Iowa, and I kept telling you can't win when your offense sucks like that. And then I watched them barely beat Georgia State, and the struggle to beat an LSU team's not good. I'm thinking, boy, this Auburn team's not good. And then they went out, and even though they lost by 24 to Georgia, they played hard. And the last 2 games, they smacked Arkansas on the road, and they smacked Ole Miss this weekend. And I'm like, but you know what? The Iron Bowl's at Auburn this year, Vince.
Right.
It's not a lock that it's going to be there. So to answer his question, yes, there is still a chance for them to be there.
There's some of the matchups here. Chief Brody put them up here.
Mm-hmm.
OSU, Michigan, OSU, MSU, Georgia, Bama. And he says, I think OU and Oregon could catch a loss. Same with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
There's a path. There's absolutely a path. It's just that there's going to be, and I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think there's going to be a bunch of debate about one-loss teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the debate's going to be. Who are the best one-loss teams and who's going to get in with the one loss, right?
Right.
And if Cincinnati loses, that hurts Notre Dame.
Right.
So people have to remember that. Do you want Cincinnati to lose? Because if they do, that really hurts Notre Dame's resume because a double-digit loss at home to a one-loss Cincinnati team who lost to a team that's not very good, whoever it is, right? That hurts Notre Dame big time.
Yeah. Here's a comment I want to respond to. We're kind of going back a little bit, and we're going to answer. We're answering more questions today just because we've missed engaging with you guys as much.
Yeah, it's fun.
P-Mac says, in 88, did anyone say, well, it was just West Virginia? I was only 4, so I don't know if West Virginia was a power or a one-hit wonder. They were a one-hit wonder. They were. But here's the difference. Here's where that reason doesn't hold up. Number one, that season, they were ranked number 4. Or number 3 going into that game. So if you play, it was for a championship. If Notre Dame goes to the playoff and plays Cincinnati, I'm not going to say, well, I wanted a bigger name. No, it's a playoff game.
Right.
I don't care who they play. It's a playoff game. Here's the other difference between that team and Notre Dame's current situation. In 88, Notre Dame beat Miami, they beat Michigan, and they beat USC, who at the time that they played were all ranked 1st or 2nd, right? And so that's the equivalent of today, a regular season in which Notre Dame beat Bama, Oregon, and Ohio State. Right. That's the equivalent of what they did in 88. In the regular season, they would have beat Bama, Oregon, and Ohio State this year.
Right.
That's the equivalent. Or Georgia. But Miami was in the 80s the Alabama of today. Won 3 titles in 5 years. The only 2 years they didn't win a title when they lost to Notre Dame, 88-90.
Right.
Because they won in 87, won in 89, won in 91. Didn't win in 88, didn't win in 90 because they lost to Notre Dame. So to me at this point, Vince, it's a different scenario. If Notre Dame would have beat those 3 teams, I don't care who they play in the playoff. You could schedule Army for all I care. If Army was undefeated and made the play, it wouldn't matter because you've already proven you're the best team in the country about who you beat in the regular season.
Yes, no question. Completely agree. That's what Notre Dame is, in my opinion. Yeah, you can talk about the big bowl games, blah 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 blah. They're missing the playoff win,
right?
And it doesn't matter who they play. If they win a playoff game, this team has taken another step.
Well, I would say they're missing. I'd say the thing is they're not just missing the playoff. They're missing the playoff combined with the kind of regular season wins that Notre Dame regularly had back then. That's the difference.
Sure.
Notre Dame doesn't have. I mean, you could point to Clemson kind of last year, but Clemson last year, didn't have their 3 of their 4 best players. And then when they were healthy, they curb stomped Notre Dame. So to me, that's the difference is Lou Holtz won those big games. So when they got to the Fiesta Bowl, there was no doubt that they were the best team. There was no monkey to get off their back other than just the championship.
Just
right?
win it. Exactly.
Win it. You've already proven you've beaten all the big dogs. I mean, you literally knocked off. I mean, USC was number 2. If USC beats Notre Dame in that last game, they're playing for a championship that year, right? Michigan finished that year in the top 5. And I'm trying to remember, Vince, I'm going to look this up. I think at the end of the year that Notre Dame beat 3 of the top 4 teams in the country, like the final rankings.
Oh, out of the final rankings?
Yeah, because they beat number 2. They beat number 2 Miami, and they beat West Virginia, finished 5, and Michigan finished 4th. So by the end of the year, Notre Dame beat the team that finished 2nd. They beat the team that finished 5th. They beat the team that finished 4th. And then USC finished 7th. They beat 4 teams that finished in the top 7.
Yeah.
Right? So the West Virginia game was sort of like an icing on the cake. So, yes, it was a one-hit wonder, but it's a little bit of a different situation. But I love the counter, though. That's why I wanted to put it up by PMAC, because I like that people are willing to think things through and challenge what we say. What makes it fun. We have a super chat from Jordan Schreiber. Best Irish show around. Thank you. Any more intel on why Rocco isn't getting PT and what's the latest intel on Zeke? Brian Kelly said today Zeke Curl is cleared.
And
Love where the line could be next year.
Full uniform, going through pregame drills on Saturday because I
would imagine
put my
he was
eyeballs
cleared
on
last
him.
week too.
Yeah. Yep.
Any intel on why Rock wasn't playing? I don't have any. They've been pretty tight-lipped these last couple weeks. Ever since Kelly went in the attack the medium mode, which I get, whatever. Find a common enemy. It is what it is.
Right.
I've gotten almost nothing from my normal sources.
Very tight-lipped on him.
Yeah.
But
so Michigan State game was huge, Vince.
Yes.
We're not going to obviously be able to get to quite as many games because you have to go. But yeah, I picked Michigan State winning 27-24. You picked Michigan State winning 24-21. We were along the same lines. I was too a little surprised at how high scoring it was.
But high scoring. Yeah.
Man, it was an awesome game.
Great. It was so great.
The Ohio State Penn State game to me showed me something. What I said to a friend of mine is I would argue that Ohio State has played 3 good teams all year. That's it.
Sure.
And that would be Minnesota, who look, they're 5-2, 6-2.
Right.
Minnesota's leading the West right now. Nobody's talking about Minnesota right now, but they lead the West. They're a pretty mediocre team in my opinion, but that and Ohio State was in a dogfight with them until their stud running back got hurt. And that's when Ohio State pulled away. But Ohio State didn't play well that game. They lost at home to Oregon, and they struggled with a Penn State team that's now lost 3 games in a row.
I just think that Ohio State defense is going to be their undoing at some point. At some point, if there's an offense out there that can take advantage of that Ohio State defense and keep that offense off the field, then Ohio State's vulnerable.
Yes, and their offense is good, but it's not as elite as
it's not like it was.
They scored 45 against Minnesota, right? But they had a 32-yard fumble return, and then they kind of put it away late with some scores. But they were struggling with Minnesota for a long time. And Penn State, who can't throw on anybody worth a darn, passed all over Ohio State secondary. And it's not a situation of what I said to a friend of mine is, because I don't want to play Ohio State this year. And I'm like,
yeah, you do.
This is the year to play Ohio State.
Yeah, you do.
Because there's some great. I'd be very nervous about the matchup of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson against Notre Dame's corners right now. That would scare me a little bit.
Oh no, absolutely.
But I'm also, if I'm Ohio State, their corners, their secondary is just not talented.
Right.
They're just not.
That's exactly right.
And would I probably pick Ohio State to win that game? Maybe, probably, just because I need to see more from Notre Dame. But that team does. I keep telling everybody these are not vintage Ohio State, Alabama, and Clemson. Well, obviously Clemson, definitely not.
And I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but I don't know that I'd want to play Ohio State this year because let's say you beat them, which I think Notre Dame could do. I think they could beat Ohio State this year. And Ohio State gets an entire offseason to sit on that and then play Notre Dame in the first game of the next year.
And then Notre Dame would get an offseason to get ready to play Ohio State again next year at home. Because here's the way, that's a great point, right? But here's the way I look at it is you'd have a chance to play Ohio State 3 straight years. If you beat them on a neutral field and you beat them at home, all of a sudden you're 2-1 against Ohio State. Like, that'd be huge for Notre Dame perception-wise. So that's why I would like that opportunity, in my opinion. So, So that's there's a couple other games this weekend, Vince, but that Ohio State just they just don't impress me a ton right now. They really don't. I'm not in love with this Ohio State team. Now they could get better, and we're hoping that Notre Dame gets better. Florida, Georgia. I love Dan Mullen as a coach, but the decision to start Anthony Richardson and leave him in as the only quarterback you lost that game before it started. You are not beating Georgia with a one-dimensional quarterback who can't throw. Like, I don't know what he was thinking in that game. And look, I get it. Emory Jones turns the ball over, but you have to be able to throw and run against Georgia. You are not going to go out there with a running quarterback because everybody's like, the comparisons between him and Cam. He's not Cam Newton.
Right.
I didn't understand that, Vince. He gave them they could not move the ball on Georgia. They moved it okay. They still got in the field goal range, missed 2 or 3 field goals in that game. But you're not beating Georgia with a one-dimensional quarterback, unless that quarterback. Maybe if it's a Lamar Jackson one-dimensional quarterback,
right,
or a Cam Newton, right. But even those guys could throw the ball downfield. Anthony Richardson can't throw. He's got a good arm, but he's not a court. There was guys open against Georgia. He just couldn't throw the ball. Just wouldn't let it go.
Right.
So anyway, anything else from this weekend, Vince?
The Michigan State game was it for me. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was such a fun game to watch, and so that's the one I really paid attention to. I was obviously outside of the Notre Dame game, but just that November is going to be great because teams are going to feast on each other, and it's going to be
Miami
chaos.
beat Pitt,
and Notre Dame can just sit
Baylor
there and
beat
watch
Texas.
Watch it all.
I mean, Kentucky loses at Mississippi State. I mean, we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of that this next month, and that's why I cannot wait for the finish to this season. And Cincinnati continues to be exposed as a not very good team. Notre Dame made them look good that day. They are not that good, in my opinion, and as they've struggled every week since playing Notre Dame, they've shown that more and more and more and more. And I'm normally not like I want a rematch thing, but I would love a rematch against Cincinnati this year.
Me too.
Then we'll end with this. TJ Kreider, the new light show appears to have instantly turned Notre Dame into a hostile environment. The light appears to have fixed the mustard pants on TV as well. Lights, except now they've jacked up the look of the helmet. The helmets don't look good on TV. Now,
they look great in person. I have no problem with them, but again, I'm on the 9th floor, so
Well, no, everyone. When we saw them live early this season, they look good.
Yeah,
just whatever NBC's doing, they look yellow on TV.
Interesting.
The last couple games.
Okay,
so, I didn't really notice it until somebody pointed it out, and then I was like, "Wow, okay." Because we had a guy on Saturday night, Vince, that just kept talking in the chat, Twitter, all he was doing for like the whole game was the helmet.
Yesterday.
Was it yesterday too?
He continued on yesterday. I'm like, look, dude, they look fine in person.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. We're going to be back tomorrow. Vince and Al, we're going to talk about some things. We haven't decided necessarily what we're going to talk about, but we're going to have plenty to talk about tomorrow. We will talk a little bit of recruiting tomorrow, but just a lot of other things. So be there for that. We will have a post. So once the playoff is announced, like once they do the top 4, we will then set a show for 15 minutes after that. So be ready for that. We'll do that tomorrow night. And then, of course, Wednesday, we'll get into some Navy Notre Dame prep, Thursday game predictions, Friday mailbag. And then, of course, Saturday post-game show, Sunday upon further review. And we're just going to keep rocking and rolling. So thanks, everybody, so much for being with us today. This was a really fun show.
It really was.
Really fun show. So I appreciate that from everybody. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for all the great questions, all the super chats, all the fun. Vince, thanks for being here with us today. Everybody have an awesome rest of your day. Check out Irish Breakdown. Lots of good stuff up on there today. And we'll see you soon. Have a good one.